So how would I diagnose perimenopause? Like you, I do a ton of blood work because I'm ruling out overlapping conditions. And then I listen to the patient and I believe her.
Say it again for the people in the back.
We have got to believe women. I don't automatically dismiss her symptoms as aging or hysteria or stress. No. The data on the Women's Health Initiative says we've saved millions of lives from breast cancer and millions of lives from heart disease. And none of it is true. There is not one stitch of data. We saved no one, not one person from taking them off or denying them access to hormone therapy. Do I think every woman should be on hormone therapy? No. But I think every woman deserves the conversation and being able to make that decision for herself.
Yeah.
And that's not happening.
In today's episode, I am absolutely thrilled to be joined by a guest that I have been dying to have ever since I started the podcast, and that is Dr. Marie-Claire Haver. Dr. Marie-Claire is based in the US, and she is a board-certified OB/GYN or obstetrician and gynecologist, and she is a leading women's health advocate, and she is on a mission to revolutionize how women approach the menopause. In this episode, we talk about what's new in menopause care, why there's such a huge gap in menopause education within the medical community, and what we can perhaps do to close it. We also debunk some myths and discuss the importance of nutrition, strength training, and talk about the importance of shifting the narrative around menopause to time of reinvention and empowerment. I am so incredibly excited to share this chat with you. Let's get into it. Marie-Claire, thank you so much for joining me today and welcome to Sydney.
Thank you for having me.
I'm so excited. So I've got so many questions for you, but what I thought it might be fun for us to do is really debunk the whole myth around that menopause is all about periods ending, not being able to have a baby anymore, and maybe some hot flushes thrown in.
Right.
Or hot flashes. And I'd love us to talk about some of those rarer symptoms. Sure. Well, they're not rare, but the ones that people maybe haven't heard of.
About.
Yeah. I'm thinking the things like today I saw a lady who has such bad dizziness and vertigo that it's actually nearly giving her like a PTSD scenario. Like she's so terrified of how bad it is. I wonder, would you be happy to talk to me about some of those type of symptoms?
So when I was researching for the new menopause, and a lot of my research was driven by people asking me questions on social media. So when 10,000 people ask you about frozen shoulder or ringing in the ears or vertigo or itchy ears, or, we can go organ system by organ
Yeah,
system.
absolutely.
And I've learned to be curious about menopause and not automatically revert back to my training, which was hot flashes, vaginal dryness, osteoporosis, the end.
Yes.
And no more periods, of course. And I ran across a paper about 2 years ago that was showing where the G-coupled estrogen receptors were in the body, and I was absolutely shocked. They're everywhere. They're in our endothelium. They are in our muscles. They're in our bones. It's our whole genital urinary system, of course, our breast and ovaries, but in the heart and the kidneys and the lungs. And that there is probably a rare cell in the human body that does not have an estrogen receptor. And to pretend that the loss of estrogen and its effects to lower inflammation and bind, is not going to affect a woman in the menopause transition and then in postmenopause, I think is a huge mistake that we've done for women in medicine.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like we have made this thing really, really small and made people stay quite small and quiet about something when actually, I was thinking the other day, what specialty does menopause belong to? It would seem that no one has wanted it. No one has wanted it for a long time.
I didn't want it.
And I think
It was like a necessary evil as part of my training, and I just hated it when I was in training. But I only got an hour in medical school and then in OB/GYN. So in the US, we have a 4-year curriculum for OB/GYN because it's surgical and
yes,
it's important. What we learn is important. But I think it was a part of reproductive endocrinology, and which I did my second year, and we had a 6-week block. And so I had 1 hour lecture each week. So I had 6 hours total and my 4-year residency over menopause.
Wow. Well, I was a young GP when the WHI study came out, and I worked in the UK, and we were pretty much told you just have to stop everyone's
Sa-
HRT. And it was kind of then as if somehow menopause went away. Of course, it didn't go away.
Most clinically relevant discussion, training, and research stopped immediately in 2000. And you can look at where the research was going. I've gone to PubMed, which in the US is the NIH like database
Oh yeah, yeah. We
for medical articles, and you use the same. And I start typing in menopause and then look at by year, and you just see this incredible slump after 2002. It's not that, of course, we were afraid that estrogen therapy would hurt a patient because of the misinterpretation of the data, but all education, all clinically relevant studies stopped. Like, what's the point if we can't give her estrogen? She's just going to have to learn to deal with it, which is a huge mistake.
I love in Avron Blooming's book Estrogen Matters when he kind of says like, why did we all not step back and go, hang on a minute, this study, this WHI study doesn't seem to be in keeping with all the prior research. I mean, I do feel a little bit guilty that I was quite a junior doctor, but I didn't really question it. We were told that you had to stop HRT. In
Same.
fact, we were kind of told, my memory is that in the UK, you're covered by a thing called Crown Indemnity. So the government insures you and you're an employee, basically. And we were kind of told, oh, you can't prescribe that because like you would get into trouble for prescribing that. You mightn't be insured if you prescribed, it's very dangerous. And so I don't know, I kind of look back and go, wow, how did I not even question that at all?
We were taught to, we were giving hormone therapy up until my last year of training, which was 2002 when the study broke. And then we weren't taught to do many alternatives. I kind of picked up a few of those as I went into practice, and these women are desperate and, having all these symptoms. And after the first probably 10 years of my training, I kind of calmed down a little bit and was a little more comfortable giving HRT, but only after we had exhausted every other option. And, one of the, I think, mistakes that the old guard in menopause made when the big article came out in the Lancet talking about modern menopause care. And they said that we have to be careful not to over medicalize menopause. And what they meant was, offer hormone therapy to all women. Whereas a woman has to see a physician or clinician 6 to 8 times before it's recognized that her symptoms might be menopausal. And even then, she only has, depending on the country, a 4 to 15% chance of receiving the gold standard of treatment. And that legacy is so hard to shake. And this is a worldwide problem. This isn't just the US or Australia or the UK. This is everywhere in the world.
I was in clinic this morning and I had a patient and she'd seen 5 people before she saw me this morning. So I think, there's seems to be this thinking that, the place is like flooded with hormones and absolutely everyone's on them. But the reality
in
is
the
it
US,
could be
it's
further from the truth.
4% of women who are eligible are receiving a government-approved hormone therapy. Now, there is compounding in the US, so that's harder to track. So we think maybe 6 to 7% of women who would benefit are actually being given the opportunity to even give it a trial. So it's really, yeah. But what is happening to these women is they're having this constellation of symptoms. So whereas I had hot flashes, brain fog, debilitating joint pain, horribly disrupted sleep, 10 years ago, I might have gone to the doctor and they would have given me a sedative for sleep, told me good luck with the brain fog, given me Veoza or some equivalent, clonidine or, clonidine patch or Neurontin for my hot flashes. I would have walked out with multiple prescriptions where all I needed was estrogen, and that would have fixed everything. So who's over medicalizing?
I know. And I have to say, as a doctor, do you not think it's so nice whenever you see someone and you do that modified green score and it's
Oh, yeah.
49, and then you see them like 6 weeks later and they walk in the door and it's like 12. And like it's like what else in medicine works kind of
That way.
quickly?
Yeah, when you look at and the same in my clinic. So I now have limited my practice just to menopause care, and I've been doing that since 2021, so almost 4 years. And so thousands now of patients just coming in to address their menopause, and I can't tell you the quality of life that we are given back to women, by one, acknowledging that you're not crazy.
Yeah.
The mental health changes, the visceral fat, the body composition changes that, because I started kind of in the nutrition space with the Galveston diet, my first book, but that just kind of was my toe in the water of menopause. And then I just dove all the way in with the new menopause and giving women their life back. So when my patients come to clinic, I joke that we put out the fires of their menopause first. The things that are disrupting their life. What's keeping them up at night? Are they not sleep? I mean, sleep disruptions are really the first thing we try to tackle. And because if you're not sleeping, nothing else is going to work well.
Right.
And then once we kind of get her back where she feels like she's back in control of her life, then we start looking at the next 30 years. And like you said, who's in charge of menopause? I don't think the poor busy in the U.S., this kind of usually falls in the OB/GYN or family medicine, which is the GP equivalent to here, or internal medicine was kind of like a GP, but they just take care of adults. So those are kind of the three primary care GP specialists in the U.S. who all have almost no training in menopause. And then some of the guidelines are so outdated. Even the American College of OB/GYN, which is like RANZAG here.
Yeah.
Is they haven't updated their menopause hormone therapy guidelines since 2014. 11 years. It's 2025. Let's
Let's
get
get
on
with the
this.
program.
Yeah. And so it still says that you use them only with severe symptoms, and the severe meaning hot flashes. No other symptoms are listed, not brain fog, not tinnitus, not vertigo, not itchy ears, not dry skin, and then vaginal estrogen.
And it usually says something like, and for the shortest possible time.
Yes, the
Lowest
dose,
for the
shortest
time.
possible time,
Yeah.
which there's absolutely no data to support that whatsoever in the literature.
So the US, the American Menopause Society,
Yeah.
they've definitely had a shift.
They've had a shift in 2022. They rewrote their guidelines. Here's a little political problem we have in the U.S. The American College of OB/GYN does not recognize the Menopause Society. It is not a part of they do not speak. The Menopause Society was a wonderful group of people who went rogue and decided to make their own society because no one was paying attention to the menopausal woman.
Oh, wow.
So ACOG does not formally recognize the Menopause Society. No one. Like, the Menopause Society stands alone. It is not a part of the American Medical Association. It's just really interesting. Now, I'm a proud member of both. I love everything I learned in OB/GYN. Just, we need to catch up with menopause care.
But it takes me back to what I said about that no one wants to own the menopause, but I feel like every
specialty.
If you're a cardiologist and you're seeing someone with palpitations and high cholesterol, are you thinking about menopause? If you're an ophthalmologist and you're seeing someone with terrible dry eyes, are you thinking about it?
Right. And we're not training them.
Yeah.
We're not. And I think it should be mandatory for all of us across the world that every clinician who touches a female after the age of 35 should have mandatory training on how menopause affects, because in the U.S., and I'm sure it's very similar here, McKinsey Group looked at what we call now the gender health gap. And women live longer than men. So if you follow all the wellness bros on social media and they're talking about, saunas and red light therapy, and ice baths for longevity, and no one's talking about menopause. And I'm like, wait a minute, we win. We live longer than you. 3 to 4 years. Like, it's not a little, it's a lot. However, 25% of that life is spent in poorer health than our male counterparts. So women, especially the ones that look like us, are much more likely to lose their independence as they age from frailty and dementia. So like in my clinic, we put out the fire of their menopause. Then we start looking at the diseases that have plagued their elders and what steps can we take now to limit that? Because what scares my patients, now I've got my life back, now I'm scared I'm going to end up like mom.
Exactly.
Which is losing her independence and having those last 10 years be really, really tough and not being able to take care of yourself and, in a sense, burdening your family with your care, and no one wants that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. No one wants to end up in a nursing home with someone taking you to the toilet and all the things. The other person I thought that I was trying to think of which specialty maybe didn't need to know about menopause, and I was thinking psychiatrists who see only men. And then I thought, no, they do still need to know about it because they need to maybe help their male patient whose partner is struggling with the menopause. So basically, the bottom line is I think every specialty is doing their patients such a disservice. But it's hard. Like I run patient events, but I've also run some practitioner events, and it can be hard to get practitioners to come. They're kind of like, oh no, that's not really I don't want to prescribe HRT, or that's not really my interest. And I'm kind of like, if people are your interest, then you need to come.
It's hard, right? In the US we've had this incredible change in how we practice medicine with venture capital and really corporatization of medicine. Doctors are employed now, they don't own their own practices by and large. And so we are kind of forced to see 30, 40 patients a day. And, you have a 15-minute slot, and 10 minutes of that is in stirrups, and you're trying to address, all the check boxes of all the things. And you receive little to no training, and then you have to rush home to be a wife or a mother or whatever, whatever balance you've tried to create in your life, and to take time out of your schedule to, go and learn about menopause when it's not required. And the sad thing is, in my continuing medical education, when I look at the hundreds of articles I'm, asked to look at each year, probably less than 2% had anything to do with menopause in order to keep up my American board certification in OBGYN.
Yeah.
It's gotten a little better. We had 6 out of 112 last year. So that was the 6 represented, we didn't have 6 in 10 years.
Wow.
So that was huge, so yay. We still have a long way to go.
They're maybe slightly listening. So let's take a step back, because one of the things that I really find so frustrating is this continual conversation that I have with patients where they'll come in and they'll say, so I've got all these symptoms, like I'm not sleeping and I'm really anxious, and suddenly I feel like I can't drive my car. I feel really worried about everything, and I'm itchy, and I've got crawling skin, and I've got a hip pain, and blah, blah, blah. And then they go and see their doctor and they get told, oh, it can't be the menopause because your bloods are normal.
Oh, gosh.
Can you, for once and for all,
Please.
please explain?
Okay. So for your listeners, we're going to do some basic endocrinology. So let's go to premenopause. And a normal, healthy woman who has a normal monthly menstrual cycle. Ovulation, which most people understand, we hatch an egg each month out of our ovaries, and then that leads to a surge in estradiol, and then over time it declines over about 14 days. That's followed by a surge in progesterone from something we call the corpus luteum in the ovary. And that pattern is very repeatable month after month after month. Ovulation starts in the brain, not in the ovary. So we have a gland in our heads called the hypothalamus that is constantly sensing the blood for estrogen levels. So when estradiol drops to a critical level, it will send a signal to a second gland in the brain called the pituitary to create substances that will then speak to the ovary to force the ovulation, and those are LH and FSH. Anyone who's been through fertility or had basic biology kind of would recognize this very EKG-like monthly pattern of hormone levels. What a lot of your listeners may not know or understand is that females are born with all of their egg supply. When we're born, we're down, when we're 5 months in utero, you have the maximum amount of eggs and they start deteriorating immediately. So when we're born, we're down to 1 to 2 million eggs. By the time we're 30, we're down to about 10% of the original egg supply. And by the time we're 40, we're down to 3%. Perimenopause is when the signals coming from the brain, as usual, go to the ovary. We've reached a critical egg level, threshold level, where those signals, the ovary becomes resistant. There's not enough eggs to hear the call. So the brain gets upset and says, where's my estrogen? And the pituitary says, I sent the signal. And the brain says, send more. We don't have the estrogen, and I'm freaking out a little bit. And so we get these bigger surges of those stimulating hormones, the FSH and LH. And you end up with these to force the ovulation, and that leads to these much higher levels of estradiol. So, and then it crashes to much lower than you've ever been. We lose any steady state. We lose any rhythmic pattern. And what used to look like a beautiful EKG month after month now becomes a zone of chaos. It is if I took spaghetti and threw it out the wall, and however it's stuck there is how your hormone levels look. So imagine you're going to go in perimenopause and have your bloods drawn. And it just depends on the day, the time of the day, where they hit. In postmenopause, when you were out of eggs, you have no estradiol, no progesterone, and your FSH and LH remain high forever, unless you give someone hormone therapy. That's easy. We're so good at diagnosing postmenopause, right? One-time blood test, done, done, done. Peri, because of these crazy wild fluctuations, we don't have a good, reliable blood test. Now, good studies coming out with AMH, anti-Müllerian hormone, which is used extensively in fertility patients. So we can kind of have a clue if her AMH is elevated, that maybe she's getting close. A wonderful study just came out looking at a very specific LDL particle. So most women will have elevations, and this is going to make your listeners gasp. Most women will have no changes in diet and exercise, a sudden acceleration of LDL levels rising rapidly, and HDL levels drop just a little bit. So total cholesterol levels go up, but that LDL, that bad cholesterol, goes up much faster. And so a beautiful study looked at a very specific form of LDL called small density LDL cholesterol, and it goes up independent of aging and through the menopause transition. So some scientists are looking at using that as a marker of perimenopause.
Oh, wouldn't it be
fantastic?
Oh, it would be so good, because honestly, so many women just get kind of gaslighted. Oh, well, it can't be. It must
You
be
must
because your
be,
life is
eat
stressful.
low fat,
Yeah, and it's because your life's stressful.
or you're just getting older.
Yeah.
And this is totally from estrogen walking out of the building.
Yeah. I want to take a quick moment to tell you about Rediscover You, my 16-week program for women in perimenopause. I built this program because I kept meeting women in my clinic who were clearly struggling, but couldn't get clear answers or real support anywhere. They'd been told it was stress or aging, or that they just needed to push through. Rediscover You is my answer to that. It combines medical education, community, and practical tools so that you can understand what's actually happening in your body and feel equipped to manage it. Women who've completed the program tell me they sleep better, feel more like themselves, and finally have the confidence to advocate for their own health. The next cohort opens soon, and you can find all the details here in the show notes. I'd love to see you in there. Now, back to Dr. Marisa. Talk to me about the Dutch test, because definitely have some people come in.
No, did they do Dutch here? Is that a
Yeah,
thing?
well, sometimes they do. From some naturopaths will do a Dutch test.
Yeah, so we have the same, like the naturopaths. We have, not every state in the U.S. recognizes naturopaths. I believe there's only 5 in the U.S. Arizona, I know, is one of them. Texas does not recognize naturopaths as clinically able to practice medicine.
Yeah, there's lots of naturopaths in Australia.
So that is, the Dutch test is the darling of the naturopath, and it's not verified. There's only one lab in the world that runs it, and it's very, very expensive. And so it looks at different, I've seen several patients will come in with them, and it looks at metabolic pathway breakdowns, and sadly it leads to a lot of recommendations for buckets of supplements, and I'm a doctor who sells supplements in the US. Like, I'm talking things I can't even pronounce, based on this Dutch test, and it's not CLIA certified. So I don't know what the validity of the test is, if it's repeatable. It's just not anything I feel like it's worth for me to investigate more. I don't feel it's helpful for my patients. I can give amazing, high quality perimenopause and menopause care without ever having to have my patients spend hundreds and hundreds of dollars on a Dutch test. It's just not necessary.
So can you spell it out for the listeners? How do we diagnose the perimenopause? So we understand now the blood test isn't going to help.
So I do a lot of blood work for my patients.
I do too.
Mhm.
I check things like vitamin D,
Mhm.
fasting insulin, all sorts of
Yep.
things.
Same.
But
Other nutritional markers. I'll
make
check.
sure they're not
Inflammation
vitamin deficient,
markers.
iron deficient.
I've diagnosed lupus. I've diagnosed arthritis. Psoriatic arthritis. I will do blood work to rule out overlapping conditions, because we have things like musculoskeletal syndrome of menopause,
Yes.
where a lot of women are getting misdiagnosed with other conditions, where there's a lot of kind of, only in females, very vague medical diagnoses that are kind of diagnoses of exclusions, like interstitial cystitis or fibromyalgia, which those of us who practice modern menopause care feel like this is probably the expression of her menopause. And long COVID, like, That's a really one we're seeing. I'm thinking that some of my patients are coming in thinking that they were diagnosed with long COVID, but they actually just kind of are going across the menopause transition, the fatigue, some of the inflammatory markers going up, may not be long COVID, but actually be perimenopause.
Yeah, I agree.
Adrenal fatigue, that's another one.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Interstitial cystitis. So many women I see with that, and no one's ever even offered them vaginal estrogen. They've been through all these very invasive tests. There's some of them are on pretty heavy medications. They're on antibiotics all the time.
I
and
can't tell you how many of my patients
so frustrating.
just go on vaginal estrogen, and within 3 months, just completely cured.
Yeah.
The frequency, the urgency, the inflammation, just that's all they needed.
I know in your book you did talk a little bit about an overlap with fibromyalgia, and now there are people really much more
That it's a
open.
real condition.
Yeah,
That
of course.
it's any disease that peaks between 45 and 55,
You have
that
to wonder.
that doesn't have a specific medical test for it, I think is really probably, we need to look at perimenopause. We just never train clinicians to include that in the differential diagnosis. But hopefully that is turning. So how would I diagnose perimenopause? Like you, I do a ton of blood work because I'm ruling out overlapping conditions. And then I listen to the patient and I believe her. I don't automatically dismiss her symptoms as aging or hysteria or stress or marital issues or raising teenagers or weight gain. No,
Say it again for the people in the back.
we have got to believe women. I was taught, I don't know if you have a similar, that there was a bias in the way I was taught, that women tended to somaticize psychological problems. This was taught. We had a code, and it's in the book, something called the WW, which was a whiny woman. It was like a little, quiet thing. We said, oh, it's a whiny woman. It was a woman coming in, usually in her 40s, with a laundry list of vague complaints. And we couldn't find anything wrong with her blood work. And she was just whiny, because that's what women go through at this age.
In the UK, you were called a whinging female, so it was a WF.
I've heard whiny gunny. I've heard whiny gunny, whiny woman, Madame Dolores. So we have a large Hispanic population. TBD, total body Dolor. Yeah,
Okay, interesting.
not just Texas.
So, what about the patient who's had the hysterectomy
Mhm.
or who's had the endometrial ablation or maybe who has a Mirena?
Yeah.
And they're kind of having all these symptoms, and then the doctor wants to know about their periods. Obviously, they either
We
don't
can't
have
use
a
the
period.
period to
So,
guide us.
yeah.
Right.
So,
So in those patients, 100% I'll check hormone levels, because I can't use the period to help guide me. But again, quite often those come back as nonspecific. LH and FSH, and I just check FSH and estradiol levels are somewhere in the perimenopausal range, which could be 20 to 200, depending on where she is, if she's cycling that month. And so very, very vague. Again, listen to the patient, rule out overlapping conditions, believe her, and we do a trial. I'm like, hey, let's try this for 3 months, see what gets better, and then we'll refer you to a specialist if some of these symptoms continue.
and so perimenopause, MHT or HRT, depending on what you want to call it, versus using the contraceptive pill. What are your thoughts?
Sure. So, for your listeners, they have to understand that contraceptive pills were developed for contraception. Menopause hormone therapy was developed to stop a hot flash. No other reason. Turns out you need much less to stop a hot flash than you do to stop an ovulation so you don't get pregnant. In the commercial formulations in both of our countries, the formulations are very different. So they're both based in usually an estrogen and a progestogen. And in menopause hormone therapy, you have estrogen to the backbone, and then we add in a progestogen if you have a uterus. Now, I often prescribe progesterone to my hysterectomy patients because it does so well with sleep. And so if they're sleep disruptive, I'm going to go ahead and suggest that as well. In the US, most commercial formulations of the estrogen is ethinyl estradiol, which is synthetic. And there's a couple of other estrogens, but we That's kind of the main one that we use in birth control. And then the progestogens are almost all synthetic. And so when we flip over to menopause hormone therapy, it's almost all body identical, bioidentical, depending on how you say it. The safety data turns out, as far as, they're both efficacious. You're both binding receptors, stopping hot flashes, helping bones, relieving brain fog, all the things, right? However, when we look at outcomes as far as blood clots, outcomes as far as, possible associations with different cancers, plain estradiol and plain progesterone that are chemically identical to what your ovaries made are safer. So in the US, I don't have a body identical formulation available in doses high enough to stop someone from getting pregnant. Right? So when I'm treating someone in perimenopause and she needs contraception, she does not want to be pregnant, then I'm using the higher dose, right? I wish I had a body identical formulation. I just don't have one chemically available. Um, that would be the first thing, if I was president, I would fix, okay, in my world.
Can we vote for you next?
Then I'm using a more traditional birth control pill. While she needs contraception. If she's having really heavy, life-disrupting irregular periods, and we've done the workup, biopsy's negative, ultrasound's normal. This is just perimenopausal bleeding, which 90% of us will have dysfunctional uterine bleeding, life disruptive for some, then the higher dose would be a better option for her. That's pretty much it. Otherwise, like coming out of Australia right now, the best data on mental health and treating mental health disorders in perimenopause is using menopause hormone therapy doses in the traditional estradiol and progesterone.
So let me take you back to the person who's, let's say their partner's had a vasectomy, so they don't need contraception, but they're perimenopause rather than, let's say they're...
Right.
Would you be happy to give them MHT or HRT rather than putting on the contraception pill?
There's never been a single large scale study done on the treatment of perimenopause. So this is literally a consensus based on talking to other experts who are seeing patients by the thousands like I am. What are you doing? What are you doing? What's working? What's working? The majority of us are using menopause hormone therapy doses. If she's super early in her menopause journey, where she's still in perimenopause, she's still having fairly regular cycles, we're going lower dose, like a 0.25 patch or a 0.375. Because what we're trying to do is, because the first signs are typically fatigue, mental health changes, anxiety, restless sleep. We're just trying to tell the brain, remember, in that chaos, it seems that if we give her estrogen in low doses, it will calm the hypothalamus down, which will calm the pituitary down, and we'll stop having this crazy roller coaster. It will not stop an ovulation in the background if she's meant to have one, but it does tend to take some of the drama out of these crazy disruptive cycles that she's having, and she tolerates it beautifully well. For the progestin, we're using progesterone, and oral is best. In the U.S., the transdermal, a lot of the compounding, the naturopaths are using creams for everything, and they're compounded. The progesterone cream in its natural form, the progesterone molecule is huge, and it does not penetrate the skin very well. So we're very worried that we're not getting the endometrial protection with the transdermal cream. So all of my patients are doing oral, and I'm like, take it at night before you go to bed, and you will sleep so much better. And they're doing incredibly well with it. Now, if she's having severe hot flashes and really, really symptomatic, like deep into her perimenopause, I'm doing a higher strength patch for her.
And why do you think people are so scared of prescribing hormones, but they're not scared to prescribe the contraceptive pill?
It's all in just how we were taught. I can't tell you how many people poo-pooed, kind of blew off. I'm sorry, I'm trying to find the right words. Your listeners may not understand my American accent or our colloquialisms. We were taught that birth control was safe. And overall, I mean, we have safety data by the millions and millions of women. We know what percentage of women is going to have a blood clot and is going to have. But where the data is kind of interesting, we're getting more information on things like depression, association of gut microbiome. Is this really disrupting her gut? How's that going to affect her long term? So what we were always taught was safe. It's fine. It's fine. I don't want to take away contraceptive options from a woman, but I don't think we're counseling really well. Also libido. If you're on birth control pills, you are suppressing the production of testosterone. And we're seeing some women really suffer terribly with loss of libido from that. So, yeah, we were taught we use it for everything. We use it for cramps. We use it for acne. We use it for heavy periods, irregular periods. We suppress periods. We do all these things. And I was so happy. I was on birth control pills continuously for years and years and years for polycystic ovarian syndrome. I loved it. I did great. No problems. But, you know, but yet we're terrified to give a woman menopause hormone therapy, which is like less than half the dose and a much more natural formulation, much less likely to cause her problems long term.
Yeah, it's definitely really hard to try and understand why people are still so resistant. Both doctors, but even just the general
And when that
population.
genie got let out of a bottle, it was a shot heard around the world from the misinterpretation of the Women's Health Initiative and really how that it was viral before the internet, right? It was the #1 medical news story in multiple countries in 2002. It was on the cover of every magazine, every major newspaper in the US, and I'm sure here as well. It was clickbait, before we clicked on anything. And you know, and even as a practicing OBGYN where menopause was under my umbrella of care, no one was putting the data in front of me that this study had been walked back and these findings had been reinterpreted. And this was well blown out of proportion, that the risks were wildly, grossly overestimated and the benefits were barely even whispered about. And I sat in a room 3.5 years ago listening to Avram Blooming, Carol Tavris, and Sharon Malone speak about this. And I sat there in tears, bawling, because no one had shared this information with me. And I thought of all the patients, all those years, who trusted me with their care. And I was a terrible menopause doctor for probably 20 years.
Yeah, me too, sadly.
Yeah. So that's my mission now.
I love it. So can you just explain to us why the WHI kind of got it wrong and why people don't need to be terrified of, a 25% increase in breast cancer and all the things that people still seem really, really frightened of?
It depends on how you look at statistics. There's absolute risk and relative risk. And most people, even I have to think about it hard. And so absolute risk is, what is the absolute chance that I'm going to die in a car wreck if I drive today? Okay. 0.0005%, and most of us know if I get in the car and I put on my seatbelt, most likely I'm going to survive. Relative risk is when we look at population risk. So we look at something that goes from, in the WHI study, for the women who took this very specific formulation of estrogen plus progesterone, remember the estrogen only arm had a 30% decreased risk of breast cancer overall and all, across all ages. And in the estrogen plus progestogen combo, which was Premarin plus medroxyprogesterone acetate or Provera, that's the only formulation they looked at, which that long ago was the #1 formulation used so there was nothing wrong with using that one. And they saw a slight increased relative risk, but it never reached statistical significance. What study have you ever seen that was on the cover of every magazine and every major newspaper?
It was on the 6 o'clock news in the UK.
That did not reach statistical significance. And the authors to this day are like, well, it was close. It was close enough for us to be fearful. They spent $1 billion of the U.S. of the NIH money on this study, which proved nothing. And it did not show that it was helpful for heart disease because the average age of the woman in the study was 63 years old. The average age woman generally starting menopause hormone therapy was about 50. And so because the outcome was looking at heart disease, they started with an older population because it takes a while to develop heart disease. Well, what we realize now is estrogen is better at prevention for heart disease than cure. And if you already have cardiovascular disease, which we can now diagnose with a CAC, a calcium artery score, that is heart disease. If you give her estrogen on top of vessels that already have plaques, we will elevate one of the metalloproteinases, which will cause that plaque to rupture possibly, and then could give her a heart attack or a stroke, which is where we saw the increased risk, right? But if you give it to her young when her arteries are healthy, you can actually preserve the health of those ovaries for years, decrease her risk of cardiovascular disease by 50% year for year.
Wow.
We have a window of opportunity there.
And that's because of these estrogen receptors on the
On the
endothelium?
endothelium.
Right. Okay. It is just unbelievable. Is anyone looking at what the repercussions of the last 20 years have been to women's health?
So, it was so funny. I was talking to Carol about this at an event last week in Los Angeles, and she was like, wants to hire an investigative journalist to like, because there's so much politics and ego, and, and at the end of the day, it's only about 4 guys who have really just built their lives to like propagate this misinformation, and they have caused an epidemic of osteoporosis and dementia in in both of our countries.
But wouldn't it be so good if we could actually show that graph just going through the roof?
So
Because
if you go to the NIH website today in the US, National Institutes of Health, the data on the Women's Health Initiative says we've saved millions of lives from breast cancer and millions of lives from heart disease. And none of it is true. There is not one stitch of data. Heart disease continues to rise, as does breast cancer. We saved no one, not one person from taking them off or denying them access to hormone therapy. Do I think every woman should be on hormone therapy? No. But I think every woman deserves a conversation and being able to make that decision for herself.
yeah.
And that's not happening anywhere in the world, unless you have tiny pockets like me and you and a few, hopefully small but mighty group of practitioners. And that's why I'm here, is I'm going to be teaching 300 clinicians everything I know about menopause in 1 hour.
Nightmare. So I'd love you to clarify again. So you have the patient who comes in, maybe you've got them as well, and they come in and they say, "Oh, I think my grandmother's sister had breast cancer."
A family history of breast cancer is not a contraindication of breast cancer. A family history of blood clots is not a contraindication. It's a nuanced conversation. If you are a high risk for a blood clot, you absolutely can have estrogen. You just want to avoid the oral formulation. You can do non-oral forms, transmucosal, rings, patches, gels, creams. Just avoid the oral pill.
Thank you for clarifying that. Now, I know that you are very interested in nutrition and exercise at this time. Probably like me, you see lots of women come in. Confidence is absolutely tanking in terms of body. They just can't even believe it. They've managed their weight their whole life.
Yeah.
They've always known how to drop a couple of kilos if they needed to. Now they just cannot.
Nothing works.
And they're feeling really depressed. They're feeling self-conscious, maybe even self-conscious with their partner. And we're just seeing confidence go down. What can these people do, and what on earth is going on that they are gaining weight when they're genuinely changing nothing?
So first of all, I believe you. It's real, and this is not your fault. It's not because you're lazy and I battle the gym bros constantly on social media who are just, they try to call me out and say, I have paper after paper after paper that document, not written by me, but written by really smart people. I'm just really good at reading and science communicating on the internet. But this is real. So what happens? Estrogen levels decline. Our inflammatory markers immediately start going up. Okay. When we become more inflamed with chronic inflammation, we start driving more fat to the intra-abdominal cavity. Our insulin resistance goes up, and we see which is how you need more insulin to do the same job. We become resistant to the effects of insulin just from estrogen walking out the door. And also with the FSH receptors on the liver, as well as estrogen receptors on the liver, we see our LDL cholesterol going up. So all of this is driving more fat to the intra-abdominal cavity into the liver in the form of fatty liver disease. So my daughter, myself, Rocio Salas-Whalen, if you follow on social, she's an endocrinologist. We are, they just submitted to the Endocrine Society meeting. The kids are doing it as medical students, but we have penned the metabolic syndrome of menopause. And so that it's just so that we can get it recognized as this is not her fault. This is not just aging. This is a very direct, response that the body has. So yeah, she's done nothing different. All the tricks that used to work are gone. This is the whole premise of the Galveston diet. And what brought me really like screaming into the menopause space was I've had thin privilege my whole life. I've always enjoyed being thin, or, I had a couple kids and I did all the tricks and the weight came right back on, da, da, da. And then all of a sudden, I was gaining weight in my midsection, and my patients had told me for years, grabbing their tummies and shaking them at me, like, what is happening here? I'm not doing anything different. And I would tell them what I was taught to tell them: work out more, eat less, you're just getting older. And definitely, if you just look at the trajectory of our weight, it's age related. Women tend to gain 1 to 3 pounds a year, regardless of their menopausal status, okay, starting at about age 35. But where we're gaining that weight is very, very different than what we see is the muscle mass loss dramatically increases through the menopause transition. It's stable. It continues to decline, but the precipitous drop stabilizes.
And do we know why we're losing so much muscle?
So there are estrogen, testosterone, receptors on the muscle that, to keep up with, and also like the way we process protein, the way our mitochondria work, like everything is affected. We're always remodeling our muscle, just like bone. Like the muscles you have today are not the same muscles you had 10 years ago. The same with our bones. We're constantly chewing up old and laying down new. And with muscle, we chew up faster and we're laying down slower. And same with bone is more that we're just laying down slower than we're chewing up faster, due to the effects of the hormone changes. So where you have less muscle, your basal metabolic rate goes down. So the calories you burn at rest is totally dependent on how much muscle you have. So we're losing muscle. So a woman who's kind of done the same thing, and most women are doing cardio, they're walking or doing some light cardio. Not a lot of us are lifting weights. And if you want to hang on to your muscle after 35, you must do resistance training. There's no way out of it. You must lift and lift heavy. Because those signals coming from the hormones don't work as well. We can give you back hormone therapy, but it's never going to be as good as your 25-year-old ovaries. So I can't replace that. And so you must eat enough protein to support the growth of muscle, and you must do the lifting. Creatine is very helpful here as well when we talk about supplementation. And then we're pushing fat into the abdominal cavity where we've never really had it before. So across the menopause transition, a woman's total body fat, 8% of it is visceral or intra-abdominal or belly fat in layman's terms. You take that same woman through cross menopause, that goes up to 23% with no changes in diet and exercise. Documented in multiple studies with
so
MRIs.
unfair.
Yes, it's so unfair. So is it inevitable? No, but it takes work. So what do we know works? This is what I counsel my patients about. I have a body scanner. I do the in-body impedance scanner. We look at muscle mass and visceral fat. Those are the only two things we really look at. I don't care what she weighs. We don't talk about weight or BMI anymore, okay? I say, okay, your visceral fat is high. What do we know works? High fiber diets. Eating lots and lots of food rich in fiber, okay? At least 25 to 35 grams a day. Cardiovascular benefits really start topping out around 38 grams per day for women for decreasing her, and dementia risk as high as 45. So I'm like, most women in the U.S. are getting 10 a day. So they're getting like a third to maybe a fourth of what they really should be eating. Movement, consistent, cardio here, zone 2 training. So not a leisurely walk, a walk like there's a bear chasing you and you can't run, like really, really getting there where you can talk through the workout, but you're struggling. So that's kind of zone 2. That's where our maximum fat burning happens. Lifting weights, super helpful, keeping those muscles strong. Probiotics, so eating a diet rich in probiotics or supplementing with probiotics has also been shown to be helpful. Turmeric, some decent studies looking at menopausal women and visceral fat accumulation. Turmeric is an anti-inflammatory, can be a little tough on the liver, so talk to your doctor first. That's not one you want to take, without being followed. But there's lots and lots of things that we can do to limit visceral fat accumulation. And hormone therapy, of course, is probably the best thing that you could do is limit the time your body's away from estrogen.
That's one of the big questions people always ask me is when they start HRT, am I going to lose weight? And sometimes they'll come back 6 weeks later for their first review and they'll say, oh, I didn't really lose any
It's
weight.
not a magic pill. It's not a magic weight loss pill. Take that out of your head. Most of my patients follow me on social, so they kind of know or they've read the book. So they kind of come in prepped and ready. But that is something that initially you should tell you, this is not a magic weight loss pill, but this will make your efforts easier.
Well, I even think when you get someone to be able to sleep through the night, then
It lowers their cortisol level.
and they're going to just even feel more like going for that walk.
Right. Everything gets better. They eat less. They have less hunger. They have, multiple studies looking at sleep deprivation and increasing appetite and decreasing movement. You're just tired, all of that compounds. And if we can get her back to sleep, then all of her efforts are going to work better in her favor.
You've probably seen all the memes of women saying that eating all the protein has become a full-time
Full-time
job.
job. Need
So, so tell me, why do we suddenly need more protein? People seem to be very confused by this.
So, I grew up in the 80s and I, was always thin and I never ever thought about how much protein I was eating. I was always just looking at calories so that I could stay thin. And if I was thin, I was healthy and that's all I needed to do. And little did I know I was chipping away at my bone and muscle strength, which are critical to me now, right? Critical to keep me out of a nursing home. And that is totally dependent on protein. So I'm telling my daughters, I'm telling my, patients coming in for preemptive menopause counseling, start these habits now before the shit hits the fan so that you have this stuff down and it's just going to make your transition so much easier. Women are not eating enough protein. They tend to eat almost nothing with breakfast, a little bit with lunch, and kind of stack everything in the last little bit. In order to avoid frailty and sarcopenia, loss of muscle mass, you need about 1.6 grams per day, and you should divide it up with every meal and snack. So 1.6 grams for every kilogram of lean body mass is going to be somewhere, like for me, 100 to 120. So most of my patients are falling between 80 to 130 grams per day. Now that's to avoid frailty. That is not to max out her maximum muscle mass. I mean, if you're bodybuilding, if you're doing serious weight training, you probably need more than that in order to really build.
I know you've got a culinary medicine qualification. Can you give our listeners a couple of hints? Like, what is a really good breakfast and lunch to have?
So I have a little trick I like called the Mary Claire parfait. And so, if you're not dairy sensitive, it's just plain Greek yogurt. In the US, I'm sure here. I went to grad school in New Zealand, so I kind of, um the plain Greek yogurt and add your own fruit to it. So I like to throw in a mix of berries. I put in flax, chia, and hemp seeds. And, to add in protein, I'll take a scoop of my favorite protein powder. And I'll either eat that as just a yogurt parfait or, throw some ice, a little bit of water, and turn that into a shake. To help me hit those protein goals. And that way you've got your probiotics, you've got anthocyanins, you've got fiber, with the chia, you've got omega-3s. You're kind of hitting so many boxes, and you're getting a wide variety. I tell my patients, especially those who are on GLP-1s, we have probably 20% of our patients end up on a GLP-1, to really focus on plants and protein. Protein, lots of lean, healthy sources, and making sure we have this little goal. And I stole this from Zoe, Zoe Nutrition.
Oh, I love them.
Love them. Is 30 plants a week. So we did a strong challenge at the beginning of the year. I love doing challenges a couple times a year with my followers. And one of the goals, and this was not a weight loss challenge, this was a get strong challenge. So I had a trainer come in and do some very basic workouts, teaching them, but we had 30 plants a week. And that's hard. I mean, if you don't do that, it's easy for me in Sydney on this trip. I mean, I'm having avocado toast and they're throwing all kind of greens on there. I'm like, this is amazing. I love the food here. And then looking for lean, protein to be eaten every meal and snack. Just stay on top of your protein goals. So I've got there's these delicious like dehydrated edamame beans that are like salted or with different flavors. And that little packet has like 12 grams of protein and probably 8 or 9 grams of fiber. I'm like, this is the best snack ever. I always have them. They're everywhere I go. They're in every drawer in my clinic, so between patients, I can quickly get a handful and snack.
Okay, that's great. I know that you have supplements, and I think it's fantastic, to be honest, because patients are so overwhelmed. I'm
And I
sure.
don't think clinicians can sell supplements did I get that wrong?
Yeah, no, not really.
Okay.
Yeah, but in pharmacies in Australia, I'm sure it's the same in the US. In fact, I've been there. The aisles are really confusing. There's like
Oh, yeah.
so many.
And we have health food stores and
And
we have
yeah,
pharmacies.
and you
we
don't know
have-
where to start, and people are really quite overwhelmed as to what they should do.
So here's my best tool, and this is what I learned, from my nutrition certification. Download a free tracker. And there's, my daughter has an undergraduate degree, the one who's in medical school now, in nutrition science. Like she was going to become a registered dietitian, but she took the MCAT and surprised us and went to medical school. So, but in her undergrad, they used something called Chronometer. It's Chronometer, and it was developed for nutrition science, for dietitians and PhD nutritionists. And So it's not about calorie counting and, keto, or it can do all that, but, it's really has a really clean database. So I recommend that to my patients. I'm like, just track what you eat for 2 weeks. Eat what you think is healthy and see where your gaps are. The supplements we sell are nutritional supplements. We're not selling menopause cures. I wish I could find one, but there's no such thing. Nothing will resuscitate your ovaries yet, right? And so, but most of my patients are deficient in fiber. I'm sure yours are very deficient in vitamin D.
Yeah.
And so I created a vitamin D, vitamin K, omega-3 combo because it's easy and I'm lazy. Don't like to take too many things because I needed more. My patients needed more. I created a fiber supplement with multiple. We have amaranth, we have quinoa, we have psyllium. We have multiple because I wanted a wide variety of sources for the fiber. We have a turmeric supplement. It's great for inflammation, especially there's studies done on women with arthritis and looking at decreasing pain. There is, we also have a creatine. So I'm super excited about creatine forever.
Okay, tell me about creatine, because I think of creatine and like big muscly
Right.
guys
And I
at
did
the gym.
too, forever. And then I found Abby Smith Ryan, who is like the world's preeminent female. She's an exercise sports nutrition. I mean, she's just, my God, she's so smart. And she did a deep dive on creatine, wrote this beautiful article looking at creatine through the lifespan for females, and really helped me understand that, we store a lot of creatine, especially when we're younger, and those stores drop off as we get older. And creatine is like critical for mitochondria and function. And so definitely if you're going to spend the time in the gym and try to stay out of a nursing home and not get osteoporosis, you must lift weights. And so creatine can be additive. Now, there's anecdotal evidence suggesting that creatine would be helpful for, brain fog and for sleep and different things. Not enough data for me to say clearly, but for the benefits to muscle, and if the musculoskeletal, if the muscles are healthy, the bones tend to be healthy. They did do a study looking at creatine, and they just gave it to women with osteoporosis, and they didn't put them in the gym, didn't have them lift weight. They just did that de novo. It didn't do anything for their bones. However, it did a lot for their muscles. And now when you put them in the gym, we see gains in their bone density. So it seems to be synergistic with resistance training in women who are menopausal.
That's so interesting. And the other thing is that women who have already been diagnosed with osteoporosis, they're often really scared of exercise.
Right. They're like, I can't work out. I'm like, this is the most, like the studies are done on women with osteopenia, with osteoporosis who are already in a nursing home.
Yeah.
So they already can't take care of themselves, and they're putting them in the gym and having them lift. They're seeing tremendous gains in their, not only, they're decreasing the risk of falls. You don't fall, you tend to not break as often.
Yeah.
And so in the US, 1 in 2 women, 50% of women will have an osteoporotic fracture. I'm not okay with that. That's why I'm laying that solely at the feet of the WHI researchers who continue to preach the unbelievable, it's going to kill you, and somehow we're better off as a society if women just stay off hormones. It's killing us, and we deserve better.
It's just, I just can't even understand. It actually is just so frustrating. It's so frustrating. But anyway, I wanted to talk to you about DEXA scans. I presume it's called the same thing in the US. When do you think someone should have a DEXA scan?
Today.
Okay, because I have to say, I do
Today.
a lot, and then people seem to be really surprised by this.
So in the US, they're not recommended until 65. Let me tell you, ladies, the cow is out of the barn. You do not want to find out. The most women are not diagnosed with osteoporosis until they fracture.
Yeah, I know. So it's so much better to know when you've got osteopenia or
Right.
Yeah.
That you can, because let me tell you, when you see those numbers, I've never seen a woman more motivated to eat that protein and go to the
Right.
gym and wear her weighted vest and do vibratory training and, and not have to take. I mean, we do have patients who do well with the bone building medications, but they have side effects, with the anti-resorptive agents. They're not easy. Right. And if I can get a woman and diagnose her early and teach her habits to hang on to that bone and muscle, and we can avoid all this mess, why wouldn't we focus on that?
I know, it's so bizarre.
So I tell patients to go pay out of pocket. It's $99 in most places and go have a bone density.
Ours is about the same, and patients are really happy to do so. And unfortunately, I get surprises all the time.
All the time.
I'm like, wow, I wasn't expecting this at all, and neither was the patient. So, just explain to us. I know you love your weighted vest. I always see you on there, with your weighted vest, and I've just started that because of you. And What is happening and why are they beneficial? Can you explain to people?
So I was, after 4 years of just doing menopause care and seeing, we stop the hot flashes and we get their brains back and they don't want to quit their jobs, or, we get their libido back and we get their vaginas fixed. And, you know, then she's like, help me stay out of a nursing home. What do we need to do? So I'm like, okay, she needs to not have dementia. So I tell them to go read Lisa Mosconi's book, The Menopause Brain. That is your guide to not get dementia. Okay.
Isn't she amazing?
Amazing. She is a dear friend. And like my Miniverse, now that you're concluded, like that woman is unbelievable to me. And like she is a one woman show. Like she is going to solve the question of how much does menopause have to do with the development of Alzheimer's disease. Like she's going to fix it.
I wanted to scan my brain. I had menopause at 34, so I'm like, scan my brain.
Yes,
and then
please
like, maybe don't scan my brain.
No, maybe I don't want to know.
Maybe I don't want to know.
She's incredible. We just taped an Oprah special on menopause, and one of the UCLA neurologists was there who's doing a tremendous amount of research on, and she is convinced that, menopause is definitely contributing to the development of Alzheimer's dementia. And she's trying to formulate a serum, like a specific estrogen that will bind to the brain and decrease the risk of the tau plaques forming.
Well, if you think about it, walk into any nursing home. I'm sure it's the same in the US. And to be honest, in the dementia units of the nursing homes,
That's where my mom is.
it's like women outnumber. I mean, there's just not a man to be seen. It's just women, all walking around. And I know that we live a little bit longer, but it doesn't really, it's like proportionally makes sense.
The researchers were all like, well, women just live longer. That's why they get Alzheimer's. No. They're getting, we have to stop just dismissing that and really look to see why this is so gender specific. Now, men do get dementia, but they tend to get vascular dementia, where we have Lewy body or the, ApoE4 gene related, or the tau plaques, so very, very different than the way that man's. And so what Lisa said to me the other day, because I interviewed her on Instagram about her new grant, she got $50 million. When I tell you, the National Institutes of Health spent $15 million on all of menopause in 2023, and Lisa got $50 million from private funding. To answer one question: how much is menopause related to Alzheimer's? Yeah, this was incredible. This is like big deal. Anyway, I love her. I really feel like in 3 years we're going to have some definite answers, and she's going to do it. And she said, because she stepped out of the NIH to get this money, she's not it's not the same paradigm that she has to follow. So she doesn't have to focus on writing papers every 3 months.
Yeah.
She just focuses on the outcomes of the research. That's it. She'll publish eventually, but that's not like the goal. That's not the carrot that's driving all the funding.
Yeah, I love her. She's amazing.
Yeah.
She spoke so well whenever she was talking to the Senate inquiry. I mean, we're over here, but we're watching what's going on in the US, and she was just amazing. I want to ask you a little bit about the brain and depression and anxiety. My very second podcast had Professor Jayashri Kulkarni, who I know you're speaking with at the Opera House on Saturday. And she is just this amazing psychiatrist who's really been championing how much estrogen is really should be at the forefront of the care of women, not only with menopausal, but probably even in postnatal depression. Like if you kind of think about it, again, why did I never think about it going, I never thought of that.
Yeah.
Tell me what you see with your patients mood-wise with perimenopause and menopause.
The anxiety is crippling in perimenopause, and it's usually the thing that will bring them into my office the fastest. With the cycle irregularity, they'll go to the gynecologist immediately, and that was my job for a long time. But now that I just do menopause care, they've usually seen 2 or 3 clinicians. They've been gaslit, or they're on some cocktail of SSRIs, right? And they may not be doing well. Well, the data coming out of Australia is very clear that in perimenopause, new or worsening, first line should be menopause hormone therapy. And I am seeing it work miracles in my patients for mental health. So both depression and anxiety-related disorders. Now, postmenopause, that's not the case. She has a new onset postmenopause. The data looks like at SSRI is probably the best place to start, and menopause hormone therapy can be adjunctive to that. But in peri, absolutely give her hormones, stabilize that brain because our neurotransmitters are heavily dependent on estradiol levels, and not just estradiol levels at baseline, but limiting the fluctuations. The brain hates that chaos, hates that fluctuation. If we can calm her down with low dose estrogen, usually in the form of a patch, so you really get a steady state, then they are doing so beautifully.
And is there any connection between the severity of your brain fog or your brain symptoms and then further cognitive decline later?
So no, thank God, no. And most women will have a rebound period and go back to some level of functioning, maybe not exactly where she was before with cognition. So the brain fog starts in perimenopause, and really like right before the period stops seems to be the worst. And in the US, we're losing at least 1 in 10 women to their jobs. They're leaving their jobs because they don't feel like they are can complete their tasks or that they've always been able to do. And in the UK, it's as high as 1 in 5. So huge effect on the workforce. And then, this new ADHD, this new inability to
that
time
last
manage.
ADHD.
And so we are seeing this kind of uncovered where she was able to manage and had built her life around her ability to manage symptoms, and that gets taken away.
Yeah, it is unbelievable. I just want to ask about what your hopes are for the future of medical school and I suppose just medical training so that we can make things different.
So there's no recognized curriculum for menopause education. We don't have that. And so what I would like to see worldwide is that in all clinical education, medical clinical education, so medical school for physicians, for our nurse practitioners, in the US we have different levels, and I'm not sure what you guys have here, but we have physician assistants, we have nurse practitioners who see patients as well. um, that this is just a normal part of their training. They learn this happens to men, this happens to women. Here's how, the two genders react differently, especially with aging and when she loses the production of estrogen and progesterone from her ovaries. This is what we need to address and understand in each organ system and how it's affected. That would be my dream. My other dream is that it's not a big deal. Every woman knows it's coming. It's like puberty. You have your girlfriends. Like I was with at the Oprah thing. I was with Halle Berry. Sorry, menopause brain for a second. Halle Berry sitting on the couch next to her, and she was talking about why don't we have menopause parties? Like we have divorce parties and wedding showers and puberty girl. Period starts and the moms get all excited and do all this stuff. Like when we know it is the end of our cycles and we're in this last third of our life, which I think should be the best third of your life, because it is for me, that should be a celebration, right? This wonderful thing. Look at us. We get to lean into our wisdom, and that she can walk into her clinician's office confidently and have an informed conversation about her menopause and how she wants to manage it and go on about her life. The end. I mean, I don't think every woman should have hormone therapy, but I think she deserves the option.
Yeah, absolutely. And what's the biggest misconception you think people have about the menopause?
That it's somehow the end. This is like, I'm 56. I'll be 57 in August. And I'm about to outlive all 3 of my brothers that died. I'm about to like pass that milestone. So I've had 6 brothers and I've lost 3 to 2 to cancer and 1 to HIV and hepatitis. And I'm about to be older than they ever were, all 3 of them. And so life to me is a gift. But I am living my best life right now. I don't want to be 45 again. I don't want to be 35. I don't want to be 20. I love my life. I have better relationships. I'm a better business person. I have better patient care. I'm teaching women by the millions. I'm part of this incredible revolution. I've got, had I not addressed my menopause and just accepted the status quo, I would not be here today. And I want every woman to wake up at 56 and feel the same way I do. And that's not happening.
We haven't talked at all about testosterone. Can you give me just a very quick...
I'm a fan. So, gosh, for my patients who have a great relationship, used to have a good libido, don't have pain, can orgasm, all the plumbing's working, all the if once they get going, they feel okay about it, but it's the whole, like, the desire, the drive to do it, and they used to have a good drive. Testosterone is miraculous for them. They feel that drive for intimacy again. They feel, especially when their partners come with them to the visit who are supportive. Um, it is really a beautiful thing to watch that intimacy be rekindled by giving her back testosterone. Now, I've used it now in hundreds and hundreds of patients, and yes, they are seeing an uptick in their libido, and I'm not talking chandeliers, you're not 25, again. Um, I've also seen women get the courage to leave a relationship that wasn't serving them. There's something magical about menopause when you circle the wagons around yourself and you're able to put up boundaries and say no to things that because you're in survival mode. And so it can be a really positive thing. But, for patients, I'm using it off label. If my patients are coming in and I have a muscle mass scanner, right? And they have low muscle mass and they are heading towards a path of sarcopenia and possible osteoporosis, I'm recommending testosterone in very low physiologic levels, female physiologic levels, to help them improve their muscle mass as long as they eat the protein and do the resistance training. I don't think it's magic, right? The testosterone, the creatine.
You're
I'd
not
love
gonna
to
have you're not
see.
gonna have Popeye arms at the end.
No, God, no. But it's like you just want to be able to get off the toilet without help. Right? And lift a grandbaby and climb a mountain or whatever you want to do, but you deserve that. And I feel like in those cases for testosterone, it can be really, really helpful for patients. Now, some are saying that they have improved stamina. Some say it improved mood. We don't have enough research to say clearly all women will benefit in those ways. But in my patient population, I'm seeing a lot of positivity around getting her back up in that 60, 70 range of her testosterone.
And do you find, though, that I find when I prescribe testosterone, it does take a little bit longer to see a result than maybe something like estrogen can
Right.
work really
Estrogen, yeah,
quickly?
3 to 4 weeks for hot flash resort. You bind the thermoregulatory center, it's almost, it's just really quick. But testosterone, again, libido is tough, and it's like
Oh, it's so
I
complicated.
say that it's a flight deck of a 747, like the males is like a light switch, doop, doop, and then ours is so complicated. So, like, to give themselves grace and to, especially if they're also having vaginal atrophy, we need weeks to allow that tissue to heal before even attempting anything again. But yeah, and then we are checking levels to make sure we're not overshooting our therapeutic windows or undershooting because, we all have different absorption rates in the skin. We're seeing that with the estrogen patches. Brilliant work from Louise Newsom
Yeah.
and her team in the UK looking at different absorption rates of the transdermal estrogen preparations. Because of that study, it has changed my practice where I was just titrating the hot flashes, but we are a lot quicker to check doses, to check blood levels for estradiol after beginning therapy, to make sure she's absorbing well. About 20% of women seem to be poor absorbers, and I was one of them.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And what about vaginal
I think
hormones?
100% of women should be on vaginal estrogen.
And both? You do if
Oh, yeah,
someone calls,
absolutely.
yes,
You can
yes.
have both. Remember, it's like cortisone cream. I mean, literally, it's a whole tube of one pill of oral estradiol, 2 milligram pill would basically be multiple tubes of vaginal estrogen. So that's like it's
Tiny
so it's such a tiny, tiny dose. And so I'm using it prophylactically with my patients. I'm not waiting until their tissues become inflamed and irritated and thin and they're having pain. Why would I do that to her? Vaginal estrogen is safe for everyone. Even with an active breast cancer, you can give her vaginal estrogen. You can absolutely save her marriage and her life and keep her out of the ER with UTIs and recurrent sepsis. I mean, so in Rachel Rubin in the US, they did a study looking at if we went into the nursing homes and did vaginal estrogen in all the nursing home patients, how many cases of sepsis would we avoid? And they think it's 50%. And how many billions of dollars of Medicare would that save with all of these recurrent admissions for UTIs
And people then get delirium and then,
yeah,
you know.
yeah. I mean, so whenever I post something like that, all of my followers who work in nursing homes, like they go crazy. They're like, "Oh my God." And they talk about these poor women who are just suffering horribly without, and we could just help so much by giving everyone vaginal estrogen because 100% of us will get GSM. 100%.
And it's the same here as in the US. We've got this terrible leaflet inside.
Oh, yeah, that it will kill you and cause a stroke, and none of that is true. So, Jennifer Weisswolf from New York, she's an NYU attorney, she a law professor, really, and so she and I co-authored the Citizens Guide to Menopause Advocacy. Very similar to what you guys put together in Australia, when you got the $500 million. I mean, I'm like, "Ooh, please, God," here in the US, but things are a little sketchy with new I don't know what's gonna happen. I don't wanna be negative. I'm gonna focus on results and not problems. And so what number 1 was mandatory education in our clinical programs. Number 2 was remove the black box warning from vaginal estrogen, for God's sake. It's ridiculous.
Sometimes I have a very long menopause consult. It's 1 hour long, and yet I still manage to fill the whole time. And occasionally I forget to mention, don't look at the little leaflet. I just trust me, I'm not going to put you wrong. And then they come back and they go,
Oh.
I didn't start that because I was a bit worried. And I'm like, no, please take the vaginal hormones.
Our consult is an hour as well.
Yeah, no, you need it, definitely.
They have to unpack their menopause trauma, you know?
And unpack all the gaslighting that they've had on their trip to visit you. I know I've even got patients who, and people I know who have been on a little wait list to see you, who are going to fly to the US to see you. So people love you.
Well, now they'll know that they can come see you and avoid the very expensive trip to the United States.
Mary Claire, you have been amazing. Thank you so much. Is there anything that we haven't covered that you would just love to get out there, or anything that you feel that we've horribly missed?
I mean, menopause is inevitable. It is not optional, but remember that it's so much more than just hot flashes. We have estrogen receptors in almost every organ system in our body, and there's no reason that you should suffer.
Thank you. I think that's a really good way to finish.